seeing customers simply as a means to an end, and as a result, maybe just seeing them as numbers. I think that companies that don't spend the time to like have a full visualization of what their customers look like, and I think maybe that is why some companies do the personas. They're trying to kind of put their customers in a box. But I think that the gap there is we need to seek customers beyond the data.
I'm thinking of this. So I know in research, so you've got the quantitative where you send the survey out and people can choose to be anonymous. There's the one-on-one interviews, sometimes telephone conversations. And then there's what you guys call the focus group, right? Where you bring a bunch of individuals to a room to ask those questions. Now, when people don't say what they mean, especially when there are like 4 people there, and sometimes they probably just want to mirror their responses based on what the other person has said. How do you navigate that complexity to be able to get the right information from individual A, the right information from individual B, and then C, without one influencing the response of the other? Hi, Iwalola.
Hi, Kolade.
Welcome to the Customer Experience Room. It's a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I am aware that you are in user experience and customer insights, and you work with one of the foremost microfinance banks in Nigeria now. Okay. So I'm curious, what was your inspiration? How did you find yourself in that career life?
So I typically just call myself a researcher.
Okay.
And this is an unpopular opinion that will probably have me by the stakes, but I consider myself a researcher, like I said, and how I got here is that I studied law, interestingly.
Oh.
In university, slightly against my will, in true Nigerian parents fashion.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I wanted to study, but I came out with a mindset that I think has guided me up to this point, and that is analytical thinking, being able to see a problem, dissect it, see what's common amongst maybe previous comment issue or something commentary that you've seen, and trying to like apply what you've learned here to another. So how I got into research was coincidental. There was a role at Fidelity Bank, and they were headhunting for that role. And after I practiced law for a couple of years, I was like, I just want to do something different. So let me just, broaden my wings and see where life takes me, right?
Yeah.
So I had that approach, and I was applying to anything that I found interesting. I'm not even sure how this Fidelity Bank customer experience team found me. Maybe I applied. I don't really remember. It's been a while. But they reached out, and the role was a digital banking experience role. They had just created their digital banking products, and they were trying to get customers used to it, get customers using it, and all of that. So they wanted foreign trained graduates for some reason, but I think that it was their strategy, their sales strategy. They wanted people who have been exposed to those products ordinarily in their daily life. And so I guess they figured that if you studied abroad, you've probably used online banking, mobile banking in some way. And, there was like a whole training and all of that. But yeah, that's how I got into research. That role required us to basically get feedback from their customers and translate this feedback into insights that their product teams could actually use to develop and improve their products. And that's how I got into research. There was some training. I also did quite a number of courses myself in product and user experience and research. And yeah, I guess that's how I got to where I am today. Number of roles later.
But you enjoy what you do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I really enjoy what I do. That's the kind of person I am. That was the reason why I couldn't stick with law. I didn't really enjoy it. So I've always had this. I've always been. Money is nice, so don't get like I love money is nice. Getting paid very well is nice, but what's even more important to me is having an impact, and that's what I was looking out for. In when I was doing that career transition, I wanted to do something that gave me that feeling of having an impact in people's lives. I would have studied medicine. That was my goal. But looking back now, I'm not sure how that would have been. Well, I would have studied medicine if I had had the opportunity to do what I wanted to do. And yeah, I just really wanted an opportunity to make an impact, and I do it every day in my role, and I'm really glad for that.
Awesome, awesome. Who knows? If you had studied medicine, you may have ended up in medical research of some sort. So
Maybe because I do find that very interesting. When I was in secondary school, I really enjoyed chemistry.
ah,
And I mean, if you do a lot of testing and things like that, I really enjoyed that. So it's possible, maybe.
awesome, awesome. So in the span of how many years have you been in user experience and customer
Uh,
insights now?
2018, 2019 to now, that's about 8 years.
8 years.
Mhm.
And within that 8 years, have you moved across a number of organizations?
Oh, absolutely. So I've done traditional banking, that was Fidelity Bank, Transion, mobile technology. I specifically worked in their image technology department. Where was I after that? Interswitch, yes. I did a VC firm for like 6 months or something.
Yeah.
Before Interswitch as well. And yeah, after Interswitch, Moniepoint, where I am now.
It's a pleasure meeting you. So let's go into the crux of today's conversation. And like I said, it's a conversation. I just getting to know about what you do and how it impacts customer experience. Because one of the goals of this podcast is to find CX in places. I've had interviews with an artist, I've had interviews with someone who runs a lounge, and most recently I had one with a gerontologist. So the goal is I am excited and I want to drive that culture of customer experience, not just in Nigeria, but in the globe, everywhere. So the conversations we'll be having today will be centered around that globe. And maybe before I go into this question, I probably should start with on this premise. There are a lot of companies out there, a lot of companies that say they listen to their customers. And yet, customers are still frustrated. I've seen a lot of customer satisfaction surveys. In fact, sometimes you go to an Amala Sports and then they get your number and then they send you a survey asking you about your experience. And yet, people are still frustrated. So it means that there's most likely a mismatch between the information that is collected and if it's being put to use. So let's start with this. Your job, I believe, revolves around listening to customers. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So when you think about listening to customers, what does it look like for many businesses today, in your opinion? What does listening to customers look like for many businesses today?
So just like what you said, listening to customers, and this is also has been my experience, is a feedback form. Tell us how you feel about. And while that's, I mean, if in the absence of anything, while that is still something, the problem with that is that it is reactive. I often get questions around, so people hear customer success, customer support, customer experience, and they kind of think all of that is the same. And I think what contributes to that is just what we're saying here, where listening to customers essentially is just completing a form. But if that is what listening to customers means for an entire organization, it simply means you're essentially just customer support with a slight delay, where you are taking feedback. Most likely customers are reporting something or saying they want something.
Yeah.
And then you believe that, oh, let's just give the customers what they want, or let's fix this issue. I think that's the gap that we see a lot. And what customer experience is missing there is the research, that deep need to understand a customer. So we shouldn't just be looking at the insights from the feedback they give in a form. You should be spending time with them. We should be in the field with them. If you are selling amala, every time when your customers come in, talk to them. How was your day? What are you doing? Where are you coming from? You should know you should be able to understand the way your customers think. What are the problems they're having? You might realize that, oh, maybe this type of a customer is beer that they need when they're eating amala, just from talking to them. They may not even have been able to conceptualize that need.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, a customer will tell you that it's just like if you go to a hospital now and you tell the doctor, oh, I've been taking paracetamol. Paracetamol is not the answer. It's not the solution. It's a symptom treater.
Yeah.
Just like if you tell the doctor, I'm in pain, please, I need something for my pain. The doctor should be thinking, what is the cause of this pain? as opposed to let me just treat the pain. And by putting out forms in that way only, by doing just that and considering that to be the entirety of a customer experience research, that's essentially what you're doing. You're just treating a symptom. You're treating the symptoms that the customers report, as opposed to understanding what's the underlying need. When you go to the hospital, the doctor asks you about your lifestyle. What do you do? How do you eat? They ask all of those exploratory questions. That is the kind of research we should be doing, and that's the gap that I see.
So I hear you that we need to go beyond the surface of just sending out surveys. We need to find out the root cause. What is the rationale behind that particular behavior?
Mhm.
And I hear something around personalization there,
Mhm.
because if you want to know what makes this individual tick,
Mhm.
what really matters to this person, it means that in asking the questions, you should also have at the back of your mind that you want something that is tailored to the experience of this particular individual.
Mhm.
Now, that I think that is absolutely good. Now, I'm curious. In collecting feedback, I know that there are quantitative styles of collecting feedback and there are qualitative styles. Now, in your experience, is one better than the other?
That's interesting. I was just teaching a cohort of mentees yesterday around quantitative and qualitative, and a similar question came up, and someone asked that, and there's this general, I think, there's this general approach that people feel, if in the absence of qualitative research, we should just go ahead and do a survey. At least we're getting something right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that there's one better than the other. I think it all depends on what the question is, and that's what I was teaching these mentees yesterday. That in determining a method is simply your hypothesis. You're saying this question exists. Choosing a method is, this is my hypothesis is that using this approach would help me get evidence to answer this question that I have.
Mm.
So if the question that is being asked requires a quantitative metric, so maybe you want to know how many people have this perception, then that is a quantitative, that's a numbers question. If you want to know why, maybe why this behavior exists, why these people have this attitude or this perception, you're doing a qualitative. And I would say generally, in my experience, it's usually both required, usually mixed methods, because what does it, how does it help if I only know what people are doing, if I don't know why people are doing it? Like, if I know what they are doing, I'm just reacting like a robot. But if I know why they are doing it, I can think more creatively about designing an experience that's great for them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about feedback. Let's dive in a little deeper.
Mhm.
Now, there's this conceptualization in my head now of a journey when it comes to feedback,
Mhm.
from collection to resolution,
Mhm.
hopefully sustainable resolution.
Mhm.
We've come to an agreement that there are a lot of surveys out there.
Mhm.
People collect,
Mhm.
and even with large organizations.
Mhm.
In your opinion, where does that feedback get stuck? Where does it get stuck? Because I'm sure a lot of people collect this feedback, but they don't translate
Mhm.
into solutions.
Mhm.
So where does it get stuck? Is it one guy at the top that just says, I don't have money to invest in this thing? Or is it that some people are just not analyzing? Let me not put words in your mouth, but in your experience, where does that feedback
There's so
get
much
stuck?
happening in my head right now that I won't say. But what I will say is there are so many places in which you get stuck. There are so many places. So, but let me talk about what I think is the most common in my experience, and that is as a researcher, our job is translating all of these feedback to insights. So
Yes.
I try to explain to people that if how a finding is different from an insight. A finding is maybe 1 in 10 people like amala, but that is simply a finding. The insight is what is we are going to do with that information as an organization. And
Mm.
I think that is one gap, right? So usually the problem there is maybe the person who's gathering this feedback or these findings not having enough context about the organization, maybe not being in the rooms where these decisions are being made, right? So the finding is probably in a report somewhere. And I'm thinking of one of our higher ups who mentioned how some time ago that how our team just puts out lengthy reports. So that's another blocker there. how many people are actually reading all of these reports in an organization? Yes, I would say absolutely. There are people in various organizations that I worked with there that spend time actually going through these reports because they know how valuable it is in helping them make decisions they need to make, right? But not everyone does. And that is a gap that personally, as someone who is in charge of research in my organization,
Yeah.
it is my duty to figure out a way to get everyone whose job it is to design a great experience for customers. So from engineers, from customer support, from product managers, all of them, how do I get them to embrace this culture where they are actively seeking ways to apply the findings, the insights in the ways that, would translate to a good experience for the customers? Then I'll say finally that another major blocker is when research is not embraced at an institutional level, especially higher up in organizations, right? And this is something
Yeah.
I've experienced where, yes, there are researchers, there are research teams, there are R&D departments who are doing research, but from the top down, I mean, how how much effort it takes to push
Push it
something
up.
up, right? So, and that's not to say that bottom up shouldn't be happening,
Yeah.
but that it needs to be a culture that is embraced from the top down, where at the highest level, decisions are not just being made because, oh, we have to do this because our biggest competitor is doing it. No, it shouldn't be, oh, we have to do this because, I maybe as the higher up, maybe I experienced this when I flew on a plane and they did this and they did that. So let me just do that. What if what
I
was
know
done doesn't
that.
translate to your customers, right?
Yeah.
So I think, yes, it needs to be embraced. That approach, that perspective where the customer is the center, right? And it's so important for us to understand how our customers thinking. Why are they thinking the way they are thinking? What are the socio-economic uh, concepts that influence the way they behave? And this is something that I captured. So I've co-authored a book with two other people. It's
Okay.
called Designing Usable Products for African Users. And in the book, we developed a framework called the African Product Resilience Framework. And it has 4 pillars: digital access, trust, digital literacy, and socioeconomic context. And essentially, what we're saying is that in designing or building products for Africans, I mean, of course, for anyone, but this book is focused more for Africans.
Yeah.
What are the how do we differ from the Western way, the ways in which products are developed in the Western world compared to for Africa, right? So those are the 4 pillars of the framework, and socioeconomic context is one of them. And what we see is that organizations that succeed in designing experiences that customers cannot stop talking about, they don't even know why they love this experience so much, is because they go deeper than just maybe translating one screen that they developed, I don't know, for the US, and then just changing the words or the language so that, oh, Nigeria, maybe using pidgin English. That doesn't cut it. It's actually about understanding the culture, right? So if you, for instance, InDrive, InDrive basically embraces the culture in Nigeria where people want to haggle. People feel like they've not gotten a good deal unless they haggle. They might even be paying more than maybe when they go to the supermarket too. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the fact that they've basically used technology to like translate this experience. So on InDrive, I can propose a price and the driver can negotiate with me. That is a culture that we have, and they've embraced it. And InDrive is still making money,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
those are some of the ways that I think, we can ensure that feedback or insights, feedback that translates to insights for customers, are actually not blocked, getting along the journey.
There's that culture,
Mhm.
you know. Yes. There's also ensuring that the context of that feedback is localized, so to say, so that
Mhm.
is adaptable to the place or the target audience in
Absolutely.
question. So I've got an interesting one for you.
Okay.
Someone might ask Kolade and say, Kolade, what do you want? And I say, I want a Range Rover. I
Mhm.
want a Range Rover.
Mhm.
I really do want a Range
Mhm.
Rover. I say, what do you want? I say, I want a Range Rover.
Mhm.
But in reality, it's beyond that Range Rover.
Mhm.
It is the class that comes with the Range Rover. It's
Mhm.
the experience, it's the coziness in the car,
Mhm.
and it's self-actualization for me.
Mhm.
So there's that concept of customers not saying what they really mean. And this is particular to the field of research, which has to do with data collection. You ask people that, how satisfied are you with my experience on a scale of 1 to 5? And then you say why. And then the person will tell you X, Y, Z. So in your experience, how do you really tease out the information that will be useful to you? Because sometimes we even have, okay, we have satisfied. We have, I'm fine. I'm good. But in reality, and please don't go with what I've said too. Let us learn from your experience. When you ask people questions and they tell you this, have you found out some instances that what they are saying is not what they really mean? And if that is the case, what have you been able to do about it to get the information you need to make that change?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And let me use some very simple examples that we might know. So, for instance, when I came in here today, you asked me, how am I? I said, I'm fine.
They're fine.
And you ask people, typically, just walking on the street, how far? I did. I'm good. But if the same person, I'm not feeling well. If I go to my hospital today and the doctor asks me how I am, I will start breaking down. Why are you here today? What's the problem? And, they know how to tease those questions out of you. They ask you more and more. They probe you more and more on, whatever you said initially. So that is a skill that I think every researcher has to develop. And in my book that I mentioned, one of the things we talked about is asking sideways. So just like you said, and I think this is so interesting because Nigerians and I think Africans in general, just based on my experience, when you ask us to evaluate an experience, especially with technology, unless we've had a very terrible experience, we will likely just say it was good, it was fine. We might not say it was great. We might not give you a 5, but we're probably going to give you a 4. Now, unless you've had a bad experience, then, but we typically tend to do that, lean on the positive, because think about how we're raised, how we're brought up. You're not really meant to complain, meant to just, accept things. Now, unless that you are really pushed to the wall, right? You're just meant to accept things. As far as, it's okay, you just give it that rating. And there are other contexts around this too. So there's something called the social desirability bias, where and this happens a lot in qualitative research, especially, where you might ask someone a question, and maybe just because of the topic of that question, they are not going to let you in. They're not going to, So imagine asking about someone's sexual health in an interview. They're already looking at you. This is an interview. This is
Why are you asking?
like, and they don't want to portray themselves in a negative light. So the ways in which we get around this is that concept that I said, asking sideways. Sometimes what we've seen actually works is, instead of asking the person directly that, what was your experience like, or can you explain how your experience was in this? You might ask that, of course, to start off the conversation, but you paint a picture so that it's not them, it's the third person. This woman engaged in this activity and this happened. How do you think she feels? Because they are going to tell you from their own perspective, right? So it's just being very creative about how to go beyond, how to ensure that all the biases at play don't influence the way that they give you feedback. So that's another thing. In terms of qualitative research, I think that's some of the benefits of qualitative research. Quantitative research, the question, I think, yes, it gives you something to measure, but quantitative research or metrics that don't go beyond just that number, they are lacking. Like, there's no context.
It's like asking an net promoter score question, then how likely are you to recommend? Then you don't put the adjoining question, what's the rationale behind it?
Exactly. Yes.
So someone has given you a 7 or a 9 now. You don't know why. You don't know what you are doing well or what you are not doing well.
And even, if I may add, even beyond that, we know the habit of people when completing forms. You are not likely to see anyone giving you, just like you mentioned, if someone asks you what kind of car do you want, you say a Range Rover. It's difficult for people to communicate why a Range Rover. It could be that all of my friends are using Range Rover. I cannot be the poor person in this my friend group, right? But essentially, the behavior that it's behavioral economics. It's that, oh, I cannot be seen to be less than my peers. So it's not necessarily that I want a Range Rover. Maybe what I need is a Lamborghini. Maybe that would also work, right?
Yeah.
So it's really understanding. So even beyond the forms, if I see, or anyone in my team, our process is that if we see feedback in that form, we are calling customers, we're talking to them, we're spending time with them, we're in the field, we're in our support centers, we're actually listening to what's going on, we're evaluating journeys, right? Not just looking at, oh, I want a Range Rover. It's what's the thing driving that need?
Now you mentioned, was it sidestepping or what was it?
Asking sideways.
Sideways. Okay,
Yeah.
asking sideways.
It's like from the corners. Talk to
Okay.
me from the corners.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking of this. So I know in research, so you've got the quantitative where you send the survey out and people can choose to be anonymous. There's the one-on-one interviews, sometimes telephone conversations. And then there's what you guys call the focus group, right? Where you bring a bunch of individuals to
Yes.
a room to ask those questions. Now, when people don't say what they mean, especially when there are like 4 people there, and sometimes they probably just want to mirror their responses based on what the other person has said. How do you navigate that complexity to be able to get the right information from individual A, the right information from individual B, and then C, without one influencing the response of the other?
So I would say it starts before you even get into the room. Focus groups are not meant to be used for they're not applicable for every kind of research question. Typically, it's around attitudes. You want to understand attitudes in a group dynamic, and to prevent. I mean, it's expected. People are in a room. There's usually maybe one person who is outgoing, not shy, who's usually kind of like the mouthpiece of the room. And then there are those who maybe they don't want to like cause a ruckus or so what essentially can be done in navigate that is rewarding people who say things that are different from everyone else. So you actually make it clear that, oh, we really want to understand the different perspectives and rewarding. Not, I'm not saying, oh, you should be spraying money, right? But if someone makes a comment that's different from the other, you say that's an interesting perspective. Can we talk more about it? Ask somebody else, what do they think about this perspective, right? And basically encouraging that room to be to not be averse to taking a diverse approach to answering the question or sharing their perspective.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, Iwa, let's look at this from a funnel approach.
Okay.
Some people listening might say, oh, big organizations. This is my small Amala business. How am I able to harness this sort of tactics to be able to help my business understand what my customers want? So you've talked about, quantitative, the surveys. We've talked about the focus groups. Can they use all this for their small businesses as well? Or do they need a particular style to be able to get that same level of insights for the few customers they have in comparison to the giants out there?
Okay, so I would say absolutely. And you mentioned quantitative being surveys. You don't even necessarily have to put a survey out. It's what information can you gather or do you have about your customers? When your customers come to buy Amala, do you gather any information about them at all? Like, do you know how old they are? Do you know where they live? All of that is quantitative data that can help you. So if you know that a lot of your customers are coming, maybe you are in Surulere and you have a number of customers coming from Okwebi, if you're thinking, oh, where should my next branch be? Just having that data that, oh, XYZ number of my customers or percentage of my customers are coming from Okwebi tells me that, oh, I already have promoters in Okwebi. I should open a branch there, right? Or if you know that your customers are maybe they are ordering the food and you're seeing that, oh, a lot of my customers that are ordering food are in Lekki. That should tell you that, oh, you have promoters, you have loyalists already in this area. If I'm opening a new branch, or Lekki phase 1 or wherever seems like a reasonable place for me. So it's about how intentional are you about understanding your customers? It really should not be an afterthought. Every decision you are making, so knowing how many cows to kill is all about knowing your customers. Are there particular days where more people come to buy amala? Do you know why? Maybe you notice that on Wednesdays more people come to buy amala. What if it's that, oh, maybe the offices around you, amala, then Wednesday is the day that they don't provide food for them in the office. That is data that is useful for you. So on Wednesdays, you know that not killing one cow, I'm killing two cows.
So it doesn't really matter the size of the business. What I also hear is you have to be naturally curious about your customers.
Absolutely.
And then in a structured format, collect that data.
Absolutely.
So curiosity can take on many forms. This gentleman comes into your store to buy amala every day. Strike up a conversation, find out, Oga, you're always coming at 2 o'clock every day. Is it break time? So that you understand those things and then you capture that information.
Absolutely.
So essentially what you are saying now is it's not necessarily all about the tool, whether it's a survey or it's a customer forum, anything gang. You just have to be intentional about wanting to know that customer and then using that information to make the experience of the customer better while making the experience of your business better too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So CX has a cost. Whether it's a good cost or a bad cost. And in my own experience, a lot of organizations struggle to draw the relationship between customer experience, they believe it's abstract, and the company. So if our customers are not happy, the general thing is that they won't come. Right? But in your line of work, is there a hidden cost to bad CX? And is there a hidden cost to good CX? So let me ask that question and then I'll layer it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've met founders who say they don't believe in research, and they're like, what do researchers do? They just sit down, write reports, analyze data, open spreadsheets, and all of that. And the way in which I translate this to them is I actually don't even see the cost to be so hidden. I feel like it's very clear. When you have bad experiences or your customers are going through a tough time, what's the first thing that you see? They're reaching out to support all the time. You'll be having thousands and thousands of tickets daily, weekly, monthly. You have to hire support teams to handle all of those requests. It's taking money from your bottom line. It's taking time from your organization, because instead of doing the great creative work you want to do, you're fixing bugs and left and right.
Yeah.
That is one cost. And the way I look at the cost of poor customer experiences in three ways. One is that it's an operational cost. So, the support tickets, all of that. You can actually measure, you can see a direct correlation between a bad experiences and the support tickets. Any organization that is serious would be looking at what's changing in terms of my support. If you don't have a structured way of looking at the data from your customer support, in fact, you've probably not even started. Like, that is a great way to measure if things are going right or wrong. That's one. So there's the operational, and then there's revenue. Just like you said, you're spending money on the support teams that you have to hire. You're also spending a lot of money trying to retain these customers, because maybe you do Big Brother Nigeria as you spend something billion, right? And then maybe 1 million customers show up at your doorstep of your product. And then you realize that after 30 days, oh, you've not even retained up to 30% of them. You should be curious as to why. You should be looking at those dashboards every day, wondering what's going on. And then the final one is the reputation. Just go on Twitter and type in your company name and you will know you will know what's at risk, right? You see, I think people in this day and age, there are so many options. Customers have so many options. It's not like back in the day where there's only one type of, I don't know, chocolate biscuits that you could buy. There are so many. There's the imported one, there's one that's made in Nigeria. If one person is not telling their family and friends about you, that you've totally lost, like, because by spending money to acquire one customer, you're hoping that you would acquire multitudes of customers. So not only are you losing customers, you are now losing out on even acquiring them, because your loyalists are not there. It's a risk to your reputation. So I'll say those are the three things: operational costs, the revenue loss and retention and all of that, and final being reputation.
Now, I'm a Nigerian, you're a Nigerian. I've got this internet service provider that I use. And to be honest, this
Do you want to say should we say their name?
I will not say their name. But to be honest, the experience is not great. Let's put it that way. But I haven't left them. And one of the reasons why I haven't left them is, yes, I've gotten a backup, but I still haven't left them. Because even the backup too has its issues. So, and I asked myself that perhaps there are leaders out there are like, well, it's not like they've got another better option. My last spot is crap. As long as the food is sweet now. If they go to that place, they will see the same thing. And for that reason, they don't take CX as important as they should. Now, in your opinion, do you think that mentality, that mindset is right? Given our climb in Nigeria, maybe some other places in Africa, maybe in the globe, I don't know. Do you think that mindset is right? And then, based on your answer, is it something that is there anything like bad reputational damage from CX over a period of time?
So, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that do I think that the reason why some brands and products persistently have bad experiences is because the leaders are like, they don't really have an option.
Yeah.
Like, I would say I mean I can't speak for every company out there, but I would say that it's possible, but I don't see that being the reality. And let me explain why. I think most leaders out there know, just like I said, that every customer has options now.
Yeah.
Yes, they may not, the barrier to entry in some industries might be higher. Nobody's building a Dangote refinery version 2 tomorrow, right?
True.
Right. But this is the reason why economies are so against monopolies. The best industries are industries where competition is high, because you see that is where customers have so many options. If one person messes up today, they are moving on to the next one. But I think that it might be around, I think the issue there might be what is it is probably what will I call it? The context of the economy that we're in right now.
Yeah.
So you talked about service providers. I hear like that. You know how we've heard now on 10 Million Bridge, people go there and steal the roads on the side of the. So I hear that even with service providers, that it happens that their masts are damaged and things like that. I am sure that they are battling, and maybe this might sound like maybe I'm protecting the organization. I'm just trying to say that there are so many things. It's not like I don't believe that these organizations know that we could do this and they are choosing not to do this.
Great.
Essentially, what I'm saying is that there are trade-offs. There's checks and there are balances that have to happen, right? If they invest all of their money in one thing, what happens to this other thing that is also equally as important? I'm not saying that is an excuse, right? I'm simply saying that this is the reality. So organizations have to figure out what are we losing if we don't do this. And that's strategy now. That my work ties a lot into strategy.
Yeah.
So it's saying these are the options we have. If we do this, what are we doing? If we decide to go this way, are we deciding not to do, and what are we losing? How much are we going to invest in this? If we decide to go this way, what are we saying we are not doing, because by virtue of us saying we're going to do this? What are we losing by not doing the thing we are going to do? And what are we investing in doing this? And what are we going to gain? So it's all about what's the return on investment, right? What are the trade-offs that have to be made? What are the how easy is it for us to achieve this? Is something that we can decide that, we want to build, I don't know, maybe in Lagos now, because of traffic, we want to build, I don't know, a train. But how another train that goes from one place to the other, but how fast can it be done? What are the things that we're going to lose if we decide to invest in that?
Yeah.
So I think that those are all of the things that are being balanced. Again, I'm not saying that is an excuse for a bad experience, but I imagine, having been inside these organizations, that these are the conversations that are happening every day.
Yes, I see your point. I see your point, because an example of that internet service provider, they always say, when you reach out, they always say cable cut, cable cut. I'm like,
Mm.
how often is
Is
this
this
cable cuts
Mhm.
always happening? And yes, I do understand that sometimes people go to vandalize those things. But let's assume that this is true and this is a real problem. Problems that are external to them, beyond their control, and it will take them a while to fix it. In your opinion, in your experience, what do they owe the customers? How do they ensure that the experience of the customer is, well, obviously nobody's going to be happy that I don't have internet. How do they manage that experience? It has happened. How do they manage that experience?
Yeah, so it could be a decision where it shouldn't be just a communication. So I see that for a lot of service providers, I think that they perceive that the solution or the best way to manage it is simply by communicating. But you've left your customers in the lurch. What plan B have you provided? Like, there should always be a plan B. If this cable is cut, shouldn't there be like 3 cables all leading to this place, so that the turnaround time for when this damage happens to
Yeah.
when the solution is preferred is reducing every day. So I think it's essentially that, and knowing that this is a systemic issue, what is the plan B that we have in place, and plan C and plan D?
And in my experience, I think one of the things I found most frustrating was the fact that they don't even communicate. So I had to be the one to ask. You just know that the internet is not working. You see that red light on your on your router blinking, you know that there's wahala again. So they don't even communicate. So I hear you that communication is important, and obviously planning as well too, such that you have alternatives. If this happens, how do you fall to this? If that happens, how do you fall to this? Given the fact that you already understand the peculiarity of that particular location, And I suspect this is where historical data to come into play. If after a while they've looked at and see that every 1 month, this thing is always cutting.
You should be prepared,
You should be
exactly.
prepared.
Go and have your person there ready to rejoin the cables. Yeah.
So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I'm a huge advocate of optimizing customer journeys, from the beginning to the end. Now, your role is around user research and customer insights. How would that play in the customer journey? Does it happen at the beginning? Does it happen at the middle? Does it happen at the end? So I'm just curious.
So I've been in organizations in the past where customer insights is more of an evaluation of our performance as an organization, as opposed to a guiding principle for the organization. My goal is for research to exist at every point of the customer journey. I see a challenge though, with that, which is that what we see, when we do our customer journey map on a whiteboard, maybe we're using FigJam or something, and we have this extensive detailed customer journey, and we have, how the customers are feeling, what is the metric that we're using to measure, what is the fix here, or whatever, what are the approaches that we're going to take to fix these things, right? But what I see is that what we map out is, it's kind of how would I call this? It's kind of the best case scenario. We don't usually map out for like what the worst case scenario, like the edge cases, the 99% of the time this is gonna happen. But what about the 1% of the time that it happens, right? And that 1% could be the one that causes the most reputational risk to your organization, right? So that's the way I think about it. I think that research should be embedded at every part of the journey. So from the beginning, where I said, what data do you even have about your customers? Even as little as knowing where your customers are coming from is important. So it tells you, if you know that the customers that signed up today are coming from an advert that paid for, maybe a sponsored ad, it tells me, okay, let me double down here. If you know what your total addressable market is in this area, you know when it is no longer worth it for you to continue investing huge sums to acquire customers, because you have probably reached the highest threshold of customers you can acquire, down to when a customer has done the first has completed their first flow on your product, right? what information have you gathered? Do you know why they did that flow first compared to maybe there are like 10 other things they could have done? Do you know why they did that thing first? Do you know, are you measuring the time between when they signed up and when they carried out that first task on your product? Are you measuring from that first task and into perpetuity? How often do they do this thing every week? And how can we, so I've spent this amount of money on acquiring this customer. Am I getting the most that I could get from this customer? Or am I even giving the most that I could? Am I creating the most value that I could create for the customer? I feel that research is embedded in all of these parts from the beginning to the end.
So with the sort of questions you have, ask. Because there's also that bit of the personas, right? For the customer journey. Do those questions help you refine the personas that fit into those different parts of the customer journey?
Which questions are you?
So user research, for instance, now you're asking questions, for whatever reason. The goal at the end of the day is for you to improve the experience of the customers by knowing what it is they want, and there's that user persona that you use to define. So say, for instance, the awareness stage now, the sales stage, the after sales stage, there's a persona of a customer that you're using for maybe different segments of your customers. Now, what I'm saying is that we come up with those personas. Over time, you continue your research, you gain more insights. Do those insights help you to refine the personas of the customers that fit those segments? So that's the question I'm asking.
The challenge I have here is that I don't see personas as a fixed thing. And I understand the reason why we use personas in our work, but I think that it needs to change a little bit. And I think that the question you're asking me is hinting towards that, which is that I don't believe that every single customer fits into a specific persona, especially for products that have a diverse user base. Like if you have a product that an 18-year-old, like Instagram, for instance, right? They are probably, maybe I would say Instagram probably has like 3 ideal personas, like customer profiles. Maybe people are just there to have fun and enjoy, and like maybe creators and maybe businesses, right? So, but then do you think that every single person can be, so the way I use Instagram and the way you use Instagram might be similar, but we're two different personas. And I think that is something that is missing. I think that yes, in an ideal scenario, yes, personas would be, the one thing that every designer, product manager should look at when making a decision. But every single person cannot fit into each of these ideal personas. And that is why research, like I said, is an ongoing thing. Like the more you learn about your customers, the more those personas, like you said, get refined. But I really want us to like move away from thinking about customers as a persona, because everyone cannot fit into a persona. I like to think more around jobs to be done. What is it that this person is trying to achieve, and how can I think about, getting this to happen for them? I also like to think around looking at the data. So if I'm looking at the data of maybe if I'm looking at the data and I want to see how maybe in a tool like a mix panel or Hotjar, right? And I want to see what people are doing after they click this button on this screen, you will see that there are different places that people are going to in that flow map, right? I think we should be more obsessed with studying what that is than trying to create a persona that captures millions of customers, because
it's not realistic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. Now let's talk about fixing problems versus designing experiences. Now, in the areas we've broached today, we talked about the fact that customers will complain, and you look at that information and you make sense of it. But that's also seemed like a firefighting approach. Someone has complained about, maybe we just love amala, so let's use the amala analogy again. Someone has complained that your amala is too hot. 50% of your customers are complaining that your amala is too hot. And then you are fixing it. You are going to tell the people making the amala, Ejekamala equal to 2. No, sorry guys. That means make sure the amala is not too hot so that people can enjoy it. That is fixing a problem. You know. But there's also the part of being proactive, which, and I think this is one of the beauty of what it is you do. Understanding the before you actually start doing it. So in your experience, with your expertise, what's your ideology around fixing problem versus designing experiences?
I think both are important, but being reactionary means that you are late to the party, and it means that probably someone has already had a bad experience, and so they are reporting it, right? Of course, every engineer will tell you that you won't know what's going to break until it breaks, right? So that's why they say, oh, don't deploy anything to production on Friday when everybody's going on. When everybody is trying to rest on Saturday, do it on a hot Monday morning.
Yes.
So that you have enough time during the week, and there are contingencies. If something goes wrong, you can pull it back and things like that, right? So I would say that being reactionary it just means that you are behind, right? You're trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Being proactive is where it's at. But I would still say that customer feedback can be used as a roadmap, but it should also be tied into that understanding, that knowledge of customers that we have. And one organization that I see that does this in a very interesting way, and I was reading an article by one of their engineers, is Chowdeck. And what they do is they have every time a new person joins their team, and even for their existing team, they each have like quotas of orders that they have to fulfill. Like I hear that even their CEO has to do that too. And it means that I'm not like, as a researcher, or you wouldn't have to tell an engineer that this is the problem. By the time they go out into the field and they deliver an order, and they see that this customer was upset, and they know that, oh, I can actually fix this thing by writing this line of code or whatever. That's trying to translate feedback to an insight that your product team, your engineers understand. You don't need to do all of that because they themselves are experiencing it in the field. So I think that is a proactive approach that I find very interesting, that every organization should be thinking, what can we do to make sure that our builders in our team have this understanding of the products and the customers' needs on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
For some organizations, it's simply by ensuring that their team uses the product too. So if I worked in Chowdeck, I should be using Chowdeck to place an order every day.
So you have first-hand experience of what the customers are actually going through.
Exactly.
That gets your mind thinking about how do we avoid this, how do we optimize this experience?
Exactly.
Okay. So from what you've said too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could tease out that fixing problems will always happen, but you need to always have a proactive mindset. And in fixing problems, you shouldn't just be thinking about that particular problem. You should be thinking of what led to this problem.
Yes.
Is there a larger umbrella I need to be looking at, such that it's not a case of fixing this problem and then another one.
So yes, let me tie it into the amala now.
Yeah.
So if I got this feedback that the amala is too hot, I should probably be thinking, okay, what time did the customer come to order the amala? And if a lot of people are coming that the amala is too hot, does that mean that people are all coming to order amala? All these people are coming to order amala at the same time. What is that time that they're coming to order amala? If I know that people are going to come at, maybe 40% of my customers are going to come at 12 noon, I should have had the amala ready by 11, so it has time to. So fixing that problem is a roadmap for subsequent. You're telling your people that are making the amala that, please, amala batch of 12 should be ready by 11, and just keep it so that it's not so hot.
Okay. Now you've talked about being reactive versus being proactive. We've talked about firefighting, but using the insights from that firefight to reduce the possibility of you firefighting a lot in the future, so to say. Now, essentially, is it fair for us to come to this conclusion when it comes to being reactive versus being proactive. That proactivity, if there's any word like that, is the way to go. Hmm? You should be less reactive. There will be moments when you have to react because, yes, you can't account for every possibility, right? So when that happens, ensure that you harness the information that you get there to reduce the occurrence or the possibility of that occurrence in the future. Is that fair?
Absolutely. So if we find out that in Nigeria there's a new health occurrence that's coming up, we should not just say, oh, let's treat it. We should be saying, why suddenly are we having this health issue? Why are the numbers increasing? We should be doing research to understand the root cause. What is the cause of this? And that will help us figure out how can we stop this, and probably even other things that may be similar to it. So that is the way I'm thinking. We should be ready to be proactive, and to be reactive rather. We should be ready to be reactive, but being reactive shouldn't just be let us go and kill that disease. It should be let us understand the cause of this, and that will probably teach us something that we didn't know that we will now use to fill in our product roadmap as we're going forward.
Now, I'm beginning to see user research in a different light altogether, and I'm asking myself, in the tenets of functionality, all these departments, they all work towards one thing, improving customer experience, whether they know it or not. It doesn't matter whether you're in compliance or you are in customer service or you are in business development or sales. You all work together to ensure customers are happy. And from what you've said, user research is the entire customer journey. And it makes me ask this very important question. Should we not get to the point where we start having user researcher, business partners, so to say, like in every department? Would that be the solution? Or would it just be a case of driving that culture into every department?
So if I wanted to be pedantic, right? And there are some people who want to draw this distinction between user experience and customer experience.
Yeah.
We can. And really in organizations that create digital products, they can be viewed differently. But I don't like to be pedantic. Rather than trying to give my role a name definition, I like to give it a definition based on what are the outcomes expected from my role. So call me a user researcher, call me a customer researcher, call me customer insight. What's more important to me is what is the outcome of my role. If the outcome of my role is ensuring that customers have a great experience with us, at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. Now, there are different outcomes and techniques. If we strictly are talking about like user experience research, you're talking about anything that ties into the user experience design of a product. So usually the interfaces and things like that. But if you're talking about customer experience research, I typically like to call it like the overarching umbrella within which the entire journey from the way a customer sees or perceives a product or a business from the beginning to the end, and it goes beyond the interfaces. So if I really wanted to be pedantic, I would draw those distinctions. But like I said, I try to stick more to what is the outcome of the role. And that's why I also call myself a researcher. I am applying my research skills to achieve a specific outcome here. So yes, I would say I don't think that researchers need to be in every single. I mean, what would they be doing every day? But I think there need to be processes developed that ensure that decisions are made through a process where the feedback from customers lead to valuable insights that are then used to make decisions. There needs to be a process for every organization.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the hard truth. So in your experience, and you've been doing this for a while, what would you say frustrates you the most about how companies approach their customers?
I would say there's one thing, and one of them is there are a couple of things, but the one I want to touch on is seeing customers simply as a means to an end, and as a result, maybe just
Mm.
seeing them as numbers. I think that companies that don't spend the time to like have a full visualization of what their customers look like, and I think maybe that is why some companies do the personas. They're trying to kind of put their customers in a box. But I think that the gap there is we need to seek customers beyond the data. So, like if I see data now that tells me something is happening, I should be, as an organization, more curious as to the why, the who, the where, the context, like all of that rich information. You see organizations spending a lot of money doing this work of going into the field. Like, if I want to get someone passionate about something, right? I can't expect that they gain a passion about it just by hearing me report something. Like, imagine if CNN, when they are reporting something, they don't show us, like if they are reporting a war, imagine they don't show us the videos of like that's the reason why they show you the hungry children,
Yeah.
the people that are suffering. They show you those images as a way for you to emote, like to have a certain
Yeah.
emotion, right?
Yeah.
And I see that the gap there is for the organizations that just see customers as a number. They can't even have that emotion, that empathy, right? And that empathy needs to be nurtured and developed like in a continuous way. I think everyone working in an organization needs to have empathy for their customers, not just by seeing a report of X percentage of customers are happy or not.
Mm.
It's by actually like enter the field, see your customers face to face like this every like in a periodic basis.
Yeah. Yeah. So it also means that it's possible for you to have a type of data, and that data can be translated in different ways.
Mm.
Some set of people can see that data and just see numbers.
Mhm.
Some people can see that data and see improving experiences from what you've told me now. Okay.
That's absolutely true. And I think that's one of the beauties of the work that I do. I could share an insight with a designer, a product designer, and they translate it in a different way than if I share it with a marketing manager. And they apply it, that same information can be applied in different ways. So I think it's very interesting in that way.
All right. So I get into the tail end of this conversation. Two more questions. One, if you were to advise a company, doesn't matter whether they are small, medium, or large scale, how to be obsessed about their customers, what would that advice be?
I'll say there's no plug and play approach. That even two companies in the same field, in the same industry, might have two different approaches. So it will typically start from understanding what currently happens. How do they get, like right now, how do they make decisions? So that's the question I ask. Like, how do you make decisions now? And I have to do the asking sideways thing again in this, because if you ask, they will tell you what maybe they had in Harvard Business School. So I'll say the last big decision that you made, can you tell me how it came about and why did you make it that decision in your organization? You will start to hear things like, we did this because maybe our investors say we should do it, or it is important to our investors, or our competition has already done it.
Yeah.
You start to hear like patterns around that. And by the time I ask all of those probing questions, to understand how their current development process is, it could even be sometimes, especially if it's a very early stage startup, that the founder is like their customer, in the sense that this person, the reason why they decided to solve this problem is that it's a problem that they faced, right? But then what they will then start to see is that as their company grows and gets bigger, just like I said, we can't fit all customers into the 3, 4, 5 personas that we have. They start to see that the way they think things should be done is not necessarily what is applicable to all the customers that they've acquired. So by asking all of these questions, I'm able to help them figure out, okay, so this is how you currently make decisions. I will then poke holes and say, this is where we could improve. Okay, maybe this works for now for the stage that you're in as an organization. We could add this, you could change this. How do you document all of this is also something that's very important. Essentially creating an entire process that works for the kind of organization. I talked about what Childeg does.
Yeah.
Not every organization can do that.
Yeah.
Childeg is able to do that because that is the kind of product that they have. Not every organization can do that. So it's all about developing a process that is tailored to the nuances of the organization, the industry, the type of customers they have, the touch points with their customers and all of that. It could even just be that, for instance, maybe what I talked about my role at Fidelity Bank, where they had people at every branch, myself and like people in the similar role to me, who were gathering feedback from customers on a like every single day,
Yeah.
putting all of this together and translating this, sitting down with the product team and saying, this is what happened here, this is a recording, look at what happened. Because at the time, they didn't have tools that were embedded in the products to track what was actually going on in real time.
Yeah.
And their product team was not they had outsourced their product development. So they needed a way to have that constant feedback translated to their product team. So all of that is a tailored experience. It's not something you can't just adopt what Apple does or what Google does. It has to be something based on where your company is at, in terms of the number of if you have 500 customers, you probably can tailor something simpler than if you have 1,000,000 customers. How often do your customers come into your products? Or is it that maybe your product doesn't even have a digital interface? So all of that is very important in tailoring a process, for the specific company.
Okay. So I hear you that when it comes to customer obsession, so to say, one thing from what I've seen, from what you've said, is constant. You just need to want to know.
Absolutely. Curiosity is very important.
You just need to want to know. I think that's beautiful. So before we end this beautiful conversation today, I'm going to ask, perhaps is the most controversial question out there, and that is AI versus humans. Is there a reality where AI will take over customer experience? And
if it was AI experience, maybe. If it was AI experience, maybe. So I mean, it's interesting there because this is something I wrote an article about recently, but I think that AI would have specific use cases that would benefit us in customer experience, in research. For instance, AI can be used to develop models, prediction models, which is something that we currently do. So you can with AI, you can gather insights, or let me say data, about multitudes of customers and be able to predict something that they will do. A human being, unless they have an algorithm for a brain, cannot do that. But there are certain things that AI cannot do. AI cannot spend time with the customer in the field. AI cannot develop that empathy and ensure that the empathy is translated to action. There are so many nuances of the work that we do. AI cannot decide which decision is best to make because it will only look at the facts and the numbers. Meanwhile, maybe the way the brand is positioned or the way the brand intends to be positioned or wants to be positioned doesn't align with this decision. So all of that. Also, even as we are all starting to increasingly use AI agents, how does an AI agent carry out a qualitative interview with a market woman that maybe she doesn't even have, do you understand where we're going?
Yeah.
So AI can only meet us where we are at.
Yes.
And we are not AI agents. We're not agents. So, there are AI agents that people set up to carry out certain tasks for them. Those, they are not people, they are agents. So it could be someone sets up an AI agent to purchase an airline ticket for them. The way the AI agent will go about making a decision is different from the way a human being will go about making a decision. A human being will, maybe if they go on the website and they want to see lovely destination pictures, they want to see the food that they might likely eat. AI agent doesn't need to see the food that, because it's not eating the food. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the way in which experiences will be designed for AI agents, I see it being very different from the way they will be designed for human beings. And in that sense, AI cannot take over the work of a human being because we are human beings. And that nuance is very important.
Okay. So I think in one sentence, we can say AI is the tool.
It's a tool.
And you are the person.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So it's been an amazing time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today, Iwa.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a really good conversation, actually.
Yeah. If you've gotten to this part, that means you've learned something. And this is how you support us, by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. See you next time.